So what's up, guys? We're back, or as you can tell, I'm the only one that's back, and as you may be able to tell, I'm battling a cold. What you can't tell is that Zach is not here. He's in Bellefonte covering some news, so it's just me today. We'll make it a little bit quicker because there's a 50% chance I end up sneezing in the middle of this and ruining the take. And besides, one person's not that all exciting to listen to, if nothing else. Me being centered behind a banner is perhaps a little hostagey, and that's not exactly what we're trying to go for today. Nevertheless, Penn State's coming off of a 31-30 victory over Maryland. It's a game where Penn State looked good in all facets at some point during the game, but never looked great in all facets at any point during the game. The defense made 4 big stops to end the game, including an interception that sort of sealed the deal on Maryland's final drive to try and win it. The offense, of course, scored 31 points, which for this offense is more than enough, you would think, to win games. Certainly this was a little bit closer than maybe Penn State's defense would have liked to have allowed it to be. And the special teams, for the most part, aside from Joe Julius's kick out of bounds and his missed field goal, the punting unit was pretty strong. The coverage unit was pretty strong, and this is going up against Will Likely, who is one of the best return men in the country, definitely one of the best return men in the Big Ten. So for Penn State to be able to punt the ball well enough to keep him from having big returns, and when he did get the ball, he hardly averaged any yards at all. So I think that has to be taken into account as a positive, maybe more so than the misses or the miss that Julius had on the field goal. Christian Hackenberg throws for over 300 yards. He looks maybe the most like himself that we've seen in a while with downfield passes. Some great passes and catches, or the catches rather, by Chris Godwin. Made at least one impressive one-handed catch in the end zone, fighting off a defender in the process on a pretty good back shoulder throw. The catch was even better, but the throw wasn't bad. Deshaun Hamilton made some big grabs, and Geno Lewis, a guy who has sort of gone to the wayside this season as younger talent has come up the roster. He goes out and makes some big catches, makes a touchdown grab that helps Penn State win this game. So all in all, I think Penn State looks at this game and goes, we won, and we just as easily could have lost, and that didn't take place. Good crowd, great venue. If you haven't been to Baltimore, if you haven't been to M&T Bank Stadium, I suggest you do so. Whether you like the Ravens or not, it's a great venue. Kind of reminds you of sort of like FedEx Field a little bit, but maybe with less of a bowl and a little bit better seating, viewing angles. Regardless, great place to watch a game. It was a lot of fun to watch that game, and Penn State came out on top with one of the more enjoyable games to watch from a neutral point. It's hard to complain when everyone's scoring points, everyone's making some silly mistakes, and there are big plays for both teams. So I think at the end of the day, it was worth the trip, and for fans that made the trip from wherever they're from, be it New York State College, somewhere in Pennsylvania, or D.C., I think they got their money's worth on Saturday. So moving on, Penn State's going to face Illinois this week, a team that has sort of an interesting history with the Nittany Lions over the past few years. Obviously, Tim Beckman coming to campus, recruiting players in that the open window period during the sanctions remains fresh in a lot of people's minds. But Beckman is gone at Illinois. He is no longer the head coach there, which really kind of takes a lot of the edge off of disliking Illinois for a lot of fans, I believe. That's sort of water under the bridge at this point. But for Penn State more specifically, it's an opportunity to go 7-2 on the year, pick up another win, pick up another home win, where Penn State has played well as of late. It's a game that's certainly winnable. It's a game that Penn State ought to win. But with this team, as we've seen week in, week out, you never know what you're going to get. You're never really sure if you're going to get the Penn State team that uses all of the skill sets and all of the talent that it has, or if you're going to get a Penn State team that shoots itself in the foot. So nothing is really guaranteed. I think ultimately, though, Illinois is not a team that has a lot of weapons that are really going to challenge Penn State. For the first time in a while, the Nittany Lions aren't facing a team that has a mobile quarterback in the same way that the Braxton Millers and the J.T. Barretts and the Cardinal Joneses. And then last week against Maryland, Wes Lunt's a guy who has a lot of experience. He's a pretty good thrower of the ball. Excuse me. But at the same time, he doesn't pose the same kinds of threats that maybe Penn State has seen over the past few weeks. He's got, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget, he's got over 1,700 yards of passing this year. Has been pretty efficient for them, still just a little bit over 54% completion rate. has really just mostly gone to Geronimo Allison, which I have to say is probably one of the better names of a team, or better names of a player that Penn State's faced this year. He has 700 yards of receiving, and Illinois really has sort of a two-back system to go from there in the backfield, but they really don't run it that much. I think what will be interesting to see is Illinois is one of the few teams in the country that really doesn't give up very many sacks, and it's not because their offensive line is so great. It's because they like to spread out the defense, they spread out the offense, they just go 4 or 5 wide and just run from there. Because of that, these are quick hits, these are faster throws down the field. There's really not a lot of time to get to the quarterback. They've only given up 8 sacks all year. So there's an interesting dynamic where you have Carl Nassib, who leads the nation in sacks, on a Penn State defensive line that as a unit leads the nation in sacks, going up against a team that really doesn't give up sacks, and not so much because they're so good at preventing it as much as they don't keep the ball in Lunt's hands for very long, or they hand it off, quick throws, that kind of thing. It's really hard, like you kind of saw against Penn State's game against Army. It's difficult to get a sack when the other team isn't in the backfield for very long. Nevertheless, Carl Nassib found a way to get a sack, at least one sack against Army, and it wouldn't be too surprising that if of the few opportunities he gets on Saturday, he's able to do that against Illinois as well. Ultimately, this game probably comes down to how well Penn State plays. If the Nittany Lions come out, the offense is consistent, they can get some points on the board early, and Saquon Barkley maybe gets a little bit back on track. I think this is a game that Penn State's defense will be more well-equipped to sort of handle what Illinois brings to the table for 4 quarters. Certainly, every game in the Big Ten is not an easy one, and every opportunity to pick up a win in conference play comes with an extreme amount of effort in most cases, so there's no doubt that Illinois will be prepared, especially with Lunt. This won't be his first rodeo against Penn State. He's had success against them in the past, so he's not a guy that's going to come into Beaver Stadium and feel overwhelmed by the atmosphere or feel overwhelmed by the fact that he's playing a Penn State team that's playing some of its best football right now. So ultimately, good weather, good offense, and good defense, and this ought to be Penn State's game in the bag. So before I go, not so much going to answer Twitter questions today as much as speak on where Penn State is as a program right now, where the season has gone. Penn State 6-2. Neglected to mention in the Illinois segment that the Illini are 4-3 on the year. Has been sort of an up and down season. Got a win in the opening game after their game against Kent State got postponed because of bad weather. End up blowing them out. Then kind of had an up and down out of conference schedule, lose to North Carolina by 30 plus points. Have some close games in the Big Ten. That's the thing, that they've had close games all year in conference play, but haven't been able to finish a lot of them off. So that takes into account sort of a team that is equal parts capable of winning and desperate to do so, which never makes picking up wins against those kinds of teams easy. Nevertheless, Penn State has done a good job against these teams where are maybe just a little bit below where Penn State is right now, but are looking to sort of overcome the Nittany Lions and take that next step forward. And Penn State has, for the most part, done a very good job of winning those games. You can say that Temple might fall into that category, but it looks like Temple is definitely a better team than maybe people thought. Certainly we'll learn a lot about the Owls this weekend against Notre Dame, and Ohio State is Ohio State. So for the most part, you're looking at the fact that Penn State's lost 2 games to teams that are both undefeated, which is they're the only program in the country this year that has lost to 2 teams, and both teams have been undefeated. So it's sort of a unique little statistic there. Nevertheless, it's safe to say that Penn State has not always been the most impressive team on the field. The offense has struggled. The defense has been consistent, but maybe not as dominant as it was last year. There's a lot of different reasons for that aren't necessarily because of bad play. I just think that Penn State's faced teams that are able to get more yards on the ground. Army's a team that's going to run the ball a lot and does run the ball a lot. Ohio State is successful at running the ball. You kind of get these mobile quarterbacks in there, and the defense starts to give up more and more yards. And really, for Penn State's #1 rush defense last year to come into this season and repeat that performance again was going to be kind of unrealistic. It's just so difficult to be the best in the nation at something 2 years in a row. For the most part, Penn State's defense hasn't been the reason that they've lost any game this year. I think against Temple, they played well enough for Penn State's offense to have a reason to keep playing and to keep fighting for that. And that game was not decided by so many points that Penn State was ever really out of it. And Ohio State, I think, right up until midway through the fourth quarter. That game is far closer than the final score, and a lot of that has to do with Penn State's defense, rather, and how they were able to get the Buckeyes off the field relatively quickly. You have a lot of drives. They go for negative yards, for short yardage. Really, it was just the scoring drives. When Ohio State got long drives, they ended with scores. But other than that, Penn State kept them off the field, and I think that's a testament to their abilities and maybe their potential down the road to turn into a better and better defensive unit. Offensively, obviously, it's been an area that's frustrated a lot of people. I think the fact that Penn State's been able to run the ball with Saquon Barkley has really sort of opened up the balance, if you will, between the run and the pass. Christian Hackenberg has obviously not looked quite like maybe what people had hoped he would look like, but at the same time, in the past few games, he's thrown nothing but touchdowns, no interceptions. He has 3 interceptions since the final 3 games of last year. If you go three games before the end of the season, he only threw 1 interception in the final 3 games of last season, and then he's thrown 2 this year, nothing but touchdowns since. So while he has maybe not looked as lethal or as deadly as people would have liked, there's no doubt that he is a quarterback that is taking care of the ball and not giving it to the other team when Penn State can least afford it to. So I think to a certain extent, he does deserve some credit for that. But at the end of the day, Penn State's 6-2, and this is a program that's still facing a lot of issues related to the sanctions. The fact that Penn State's only starting to practice with a roster and depth players that are going to challenge first team. I mean, imagine going for years and years against players who are really not good enough to challenge you. You know, Anthony Zettel can go up against kids or guys that really aren't going to challenge him, and he's not going to get much better from that. But imagine then being able to go into practice and face some guys that are going to challenge you, that are going to make you better, and that's going to make the first team better, that's going to make the second team better, and that's going to make the team at large better. And I think Penn State's only starting to enter that period where there's real practice depth and there's real slowly starting to have real game depth where you can bring guys in, you can put somebody else out there, and you feel confident in the ability that they have to pick up where a starter left off. I think that's what makes the Michigan States and the Ohio States of the world so good. It's not so much that their ones are so much better than your ones, it's that they can substitute out a 1, put in a 2, and not have a drop-off, and that's a really difficult team to beat. And that's something that Penn State has to work for and work towards over the next couple of years. Can Penn State look better with the team that it has? I think that's probably true. But at the end of the day, Penn State's 6-2 with a good chance to get 7-2. Go to Northwestern. That's a beatable team, but Northwestern on the road is always difficult. You figure if Penn State can come back to face Michigan and Michigan State at 8-2, at 8-3 for Michigan State, however those 2 final games pan out, it's really hard to complain with that. And I think if Penn State can get a good bowl game, get sort of an exciting bowl game that falls in late December, maybe even early January, you set yourself up for a season that maybe wasn't as flashy or as exciting as Penn State fans might have liked, but certainly successful and maybe even a little bit unexpected given the amount of challenges that Penn State's had to go through over the past couple of years. But those are weeks down the road. Right now, Penn State's preparing for a noon kick this Saturday against Illinois. Should be an interesting game. Big opportunity for Penn State to pick up another win before heading on the road to Northwestern, finally getting a bye week rather, coming back to face Michigan, then on the road to close out the regular season against Michigan State. So it's a tough road ahead, but it all starts this weekend against Illinois. Zach will be back next week. I'll be back next week, and we will see you guys as Penn State gets off of their win or loss against Illinois and prepares for Northwestern.